Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. A little late start. And you know what, John?
You're going to say it's all your fault?
It's all my fault. How did you know that? It is all my fault. Okay, we're going to have to essentially reframe our clock references here. And essentially what we'll do is pretend it's like, 18 minutes ago, and we will talk about the fact that John Combest every single day puts together this incredible website. My alarm going off now. Why is that?
Yeah, that's your alarm, Brad. It's time to wake up.
What is going on?
Lazy bones.
I have no idea.
Sleeping in the sun.
I have no idea why my phone's going off. Okay, every single day, John puts together this incredible website called johncombest.com. And what it includes is dozens of interesting stories, things that you should know about, interesting observations of political leaders and things like that. But what we do is we start the show off with this guy. Your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And we start the countdown with the third one. And here is Mr. Kasem saying...
In third place...
A follow-up to a local story from the Washington Missourian yesterday. This one is from a different Missourian, the Columbia Missourian, just down I-70 to be exact. A headline, illegal marijuana sold as hemp found across Missouri, industry report shows. What a timely piece from the Columbia Missourian, considering our conversation yesterday. Yesterday we gave, some would consider, one side of the story. A story from a hemp grower who says, hey, we want some regulations around our hemp products. And by the way, the big marijuana industry is trying to keep us out. We're just a company here in Franklin County, and the big boys are trying to keep us from making money. Well, we have the other side of that story from the Columbia Missourian today, the Missouri Hemp Hoax Report. You heard that right. Missouri Hemp Hoax Report sent 55 products from around the state of Missouri on its smoke shops, gas stations, and retailers for testing. And according to this study, which was paid for by MoCannTrade, the marijuana big industry group, the results showed that 96% of those products were actually marijuana or synthetic THC, the main ingredient in cannabis plants that makes users feel high. Brad, yesterday you had a fascinating anecdote about a YouTube channel that you found where a gentleman buys various pills, supplements, assorted gimmicks from gas stations, uses high-level scientific testing machines, and then documents what's actually in these pills. I think it's fortuitous that you brought that up yesterday because that appears to be what the folks in the marijuana industry did, the big marijuana industry did, testing these products. So it appears, Brad, excuse me, it appears as though yesterday we have a story from a local hemp guy who says, hey, the big boys are exaggerating the problems. We want regulations just as much as anybody. And now we have a story about the weed industry, big marijuana, saying this is why we have to protect people from these gas station, rinky-dink, questionable, shady products. There's an additional local angle to this, too. A gentleman from the MoCannTrade Association, a guy named Andrew Mullins, he's the association's director of MoCannTrade. He points to a recent case right in Warrenton, Missouri, in which a 14-year-old was able to buy a THC vape from a shop owner. And I would also point out, before I forget, Brad, that if you go to the Missouri Hoax, the official name is Missouri Hemp Hoax Report, you can download the PDF and you can take a look at all the gas stations, smoke shops, convenience stores in which these folks walked in, bought products, and what was found when they were tested. I would point out there were no stores that were tested, as far as I could tell, Brad, in Franklin County in this particular test Franklin County, Warren County, St. Charles County. There was at least one shop I saw on the list from West County. There's something called Flair Smoke and Vape, which is apparently a location in Ballwin. I guess some sort of a weed shop in Ballwin. So big marijuana, you could call them. Critics would call them big marijuana. Some would say the industry's leading group says this is why we need rigorous testing. And one more point, Brad. The last one was penultimate. This is the final one. A gentleman named Dan Vietz, who's a longtime marijuana activist and attorney in Columbia, he strongly disagrees with the associated claims. He says, quote, MoCannTrade didn't find anything that wasn't common knowledge. They're pretending this is a big revelation. The law says hemp is defined by the plant's THC level, not the end product. Anything derived from hemp is legal, even if it contains more than 0.3 THC. So the never-ending battle between what some would call the marijuana establishment and some would call kind of outlaw rogue people continues.
John, I'm a little bit confused in this. So the MoCannTrade people did this study, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, they produced this report themselves. Yep.
But didn't the results come out looking sort of bad for them?
No, because MoCannTrade, I'm guessing here, I'm speculating, they sat down and said, we want to come up with a report that shows we want to keep all these second-rate hillbilly, rogue, outlaw producers out of our industry. So we're going to show that the products that are sold at your local convenience store are actually high in THC. And that's why we need more of a crackdown on these low-budget, scummy hemp entrepreneurs who are peddling their wares in gas stations.
So by them pointing out the fact that there is no regulatory body that's looking at this stuff, they're essentially saying we need regulation, and the regulation would favor them in respect then?
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're saying, so to be more accurate, I think MoCannTrade is saying there are regulations, but we need to enforce them. Like they're saying that these products are breaking the law, or at very best, they're in a gray area, which is why if you want to buy anything with THC, you need to do it the quote unquote right way. I'll take the MoCannTrade position here. If you want to buy these products, you do it the right way. You go to a dispensary where things are tested, where it's legitimate, where we know local governments, where it applies, will get their taxes. We need to keep these products out of gas stations, because if they're in gas stations and convenience stores, and Brad, you and I use the punchline of Magic Market on Bell Fountain Road in Spanish Lake a lot. If you can go to Magic Market and buy THC products, it defeats the purpose of having a safe, clean, legal dispensary in which to buy your products. Interesting.
The guy you referenced that I watched all the time, I still watch him from time to time, is a pharmacist. And this is and he sometimes, the bizarre part of it is a couple of times these pills that he bought and tested had essentially some of the blue pill drugs, if you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like sildenafil. Or
yes.
Colloquially, people would call them boner pills, right?
Right. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, why would you put that in there, especially if both men and women are going to, ingest these pills? This to me sort of points out the fact that I've said all along. I said, this is just crazy stuff. They should just blow it wide open. Let anybody do whatever they want. You know what I'm saying?
Let everybody. Actually, I think we should just change most places now that are, a car wash in St. Charles County. There's very few of those in St. Charles County.
Yeah.
But we should probably just change them to opium dens.
There you go. Okay.
Lying in a den in Bombay.
Ready?
Slack-jawed, not much to say. That's from Land Down Under, Brad.
You ready for two?
Yeah, let's do it.
Up a notch to number 2.
It looks like there might be a grand compromise that's a win-win for everyone. No, I don't mean you inheriting all of Tracy Ellis's real estate land. I'm talking about a headline from Bryce Gray of the Post-Dispatch. Ameren boosts electric rates, adds rules for data centers in St. Louis region. A grand compromise, it appears, has been struck by Ameren, Google, Amazon, and, drum roll, the Sierra Club. Boy, talk about a motley crew of people sitting at a table together. It was approved 4-0 Monday, yesterday, by the Missouri Public Service Commission. And what it would do is it would put a little bit of regulations around these big, dirty data centers. Here's the headline, here's the lead from Bryce Gray. Regional electric utility Ameren has agreed to new rates and rules for future data centers designed to ensure extra large customers pay their fair share and spare residents from undue costs, the company said Monday. The new rules for ultra-large energy users, like data centers, include multi-year contracts and exit fees should the companies go out of business or try to leave after agreeing to use the energy. So my takeaway from this is that everybody got together, and here's what I think is the win-win for everyone. The Sierra Club is able to say, ooh, we took Ameren to the mat, and we made sure they made promises about companies using energy, and they're going to pay their fair share. And Ameren's able to say, we're able to take the needs of our customers. We don't think our customers should have to pay for these data centers either. And we're glad that we were able to strike this compromise. And everybody's able to say that they got a big win here. And to be fair, before we discuss this, Brad, to be fair, a woman from the Sierra Club, she's a senior strategist named Jen DeRose. She says, Missourians are rightly concerned about the impacts of new data centers on their electric bills and communities, and they deserve protections. So everybody gets a win here. The Sierra Club is able to claim victory. Ameren is able to say, listen, idiots, we listen to all your whiny complaints. And P.S., Google and Amazon and Facebook, come here, put your data centers here. We're going to charge you a little bit more. But guess what? Even the Sierra Club agreed to this. So I think this is great for everybody, Brad.
But John, why isn't this was done in legislation? Why is it just done in regulation? I mean, that's what I'm always curious about when you look at even the federal government. You have the federal government, like, for example, in our field, the Federal Communications Commission, okay? They have all of a sudden wake up one morning and put this regulation in. We all got to jump and adhere to that. Why is this
So that's a good question, Brad. I would say that there's probably certain powers, regulatory, rulemaking authority that is ceded to the agency, whether it's MoDOT or like the legislature doesn't have to approve if you extend a road. If, for example, I have a headline up today in Franklin County. Washmo says, nope, we're not going to add a pedestrian access bridge path to the new bridge that MoDOT's putting in. So MoDOT doesn't have to go to the legislature and say, we'd really like to build a $2.1 million pedestrian bridge. Do you think we could maybe do it? Like there's certain things that MoDOT has discretion on. There's certain things that Missouri PSC has discretion on.
Interesting. Okay, you ready for the big number one?
Yeah, let's do it.
The number one.
State Representative Justin Sparks from right here in our broadcast area. He represents Wildwood. He has resigned his house seat in the Missouri legislature, and he is leaving for a U.S. Department of Homeland Security job. I have two stories up today about this particular piece of news. One's from the Post-Dispatch. The other's from Jason Rosenbaum. We'll go with Rosenbaum's piece. Here's the lead. A St. Louis County Republican resigned Monday to take a job in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Justin Sparks was in his third year in the Missouri House, representing the Wildwood-based 110th House District. In a resignation letter posted on Facebook, Sparks says that his, quote, entire professional life has been one of service, and that will continue as I join the Department of Homeland Security and join in the mission of keeping our nation safe. So Jason goes on to quote, further statements from Sparks here. In a subsequent Facebook post, Sparks said he did not receive a presidential appointment. He added that he was returning to law enforcement. So we don't know exactly what that job is now. Brad, I went back and I listened to the conversations that we started having right about a year ago. It was in early December, I believe, 2024, in which Justin Sparks was criticizing Missouri House leadership and particularly Speaker in waiting, John Patterson. And you may recall that Justin Sparks ran for House Speaker. You and I went back and forth about whether or not Justin Sparks had a chance to actually win that election. So we talked about it in detail. Of course, John Patterson was elected Speaker. And I think there were some hard feelings even within the Missouri Freedom Caucus. You may recall a woman who represents Eureka, Holly Jones, is a Freedom Caucus member, along with Justin Sparks. And she said she wasn't supporting him. She was supporting John Patterson. So Justin Sparks had some would say controversial, I think most people would say controversial, reign as 110th district state rep. And he's leaving now, and it looks like he'll be off to have a pretty good gig doing what he's best at.
John, you want my comment on this?
I do. And Brett, how do you feel about people leaving office early?
I hate it because, I think, I've told this stupid story about the fact that all these people spend, that people give money, they donate money to, for a person to get elected, and then they dump out, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that not Niles, we'll talk about him in a minute. I think that Mr. Sparks and Miss Greene should refund money to their campaign donors. How about that, John?
Yeah, I think that doesn't make any sense. And I think it's a foolish, bombastic idea. I do think, here's where I agree with you in principle. I think normal people will look at an Andrew Bailey or an Eric Schmidt or a Josh Hawley or the other people who you've criticized since we've done the show together. Normal people who have upward job mobility would say, so that excludes you, Brad. Normal people look at an opportunity and say, okay, if someone gets a chance to advance in their career, they should certainly give up whatever job they have now and move on, because that's a normal human thing to do. Where I do agree with you, I dislike the idea of people saying they're running for office when, let's say, they're not elected. When they say they're going to run for office or say they're going to run for re-election, knowing that they're not going to actually run for re-election, but they take money from donors anyway. And then they say, after prayerful consideration, I've decided, just kidding, I'm not going to run for this office. I'm not going to run for president. I'm not going to run for re-election. Sorry, just kidding. Like, I think that's a ruse, and I think that's a scam. Now, Justin Sparks, if you look, let's look at it from Justin's perspective. He served as a state rep for, I think Jason said 3 years now, so more than one term. A better opportunity comes along. I think it's fair to say, after challenging the Speaker of the House last year, and after claiming some of the things that he claimed about potentially illegal fundraising tactics and things like that, saying some of the things that Justin Sparks said, I think Justin sees that, he's it's not like Speaker Patterson or the next speaker is going to be giving a whole lot of responsibility to Justin Sparks. So why don't you let someone come in? I don't know. Maybe we'll talk to this guy at 7:40 a.m. today. Why don't you let somebody new come in who could do a really good job, who could serve the people? And if you're Mr. Sparks, you say, you know what? I'm really good at everything that involves law enforcement and fighting for our country. Why don't I move on and let someone else take over this state rep seat with a fresh approach?
Interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's one thing that came out yesterday about the Marjorie Taylor Greene resignation. Did you hear this about the particular date she picked? Have you heard this crazy story?
Yeah, and why did she pick that day, Brad?
Because it's the day after she becomes vested in the retirement program for
Which
the
is
U.S.
beautiful. I think that's a great thing. By the way, if folks want to hear a good conservative commentary on Marjorie Taylor Greene from a Missourian, go to johncombest.com today. And you'll see an interview from KSGF Radio, Mornings with Nick Reed, Congressman Eric Burlison, talking about how much he likes and admires MTG, how she stood up for a lot of good things. He also criticizes MTG for something. But Brad, I thought that was fascinating and good for MTG. You want to time your dates like that so you get vested as much as possible.
which is interesting because the law is, as a congressperson, you have to be in for 5 years, which would mean you couldn't just do 2 terms and get out. You had to do 3 terms, but in her case, you do 2.5 and you're just fine, right?
I love it, Brad. I like when people look at rules and say, how can I use these rules, which are written for a reason, to my advantage? I like that.